It was such a shocker to Dad because this was supposed to be 32-bit next-gen technology. To him, it was like, well, this unit must be defective. Sega would never let something of this quality reach the store shelves. This is 32-bit technology. This is next-gen. There's no way the console is just bad, right? But first, a word about this video's sponsor, GlassesUSA.com. When I was a teenager in the 2000s, one of my defining characteristics was my glasses, and I hated them. They just didn't make cool frames back in those days. Thankfully, we have GlassesUSA.com today. GlassesUSA.com is one of the biggest eyewear retailers in the US, offering thousands of eyeglasses and sunglasses such as Ray-Ban, Gucci, Oakley, and many more. Glasses start at only $39, which is up to 70% off the retail prices. Megan and I loved shopping for my new sunglasses and new frames for her and Hallie with GlassesUSA.com. They offer some amazing tools to help you find your perfect pair. One of these tools is the AR Virtual Try-On. Feeling overwhelmed by the amount of choices? There's a quiz you can take, which only takes about a minute. It suggests the right pair of glasses based on your face shape and needs. Also, shopping online at GlassesUSA.com is a risk-free shopping experience with free shipping, and returns are 100% money-back guaranteed within 14 days. GlassesUSA.com is offering a crazy exclusive discount on top of any coupon code they currently have on the website just for my followers. It's only available for 24 hours. Click on the links in the top of my description box to get all the details. Thank you, GlassesUSA.com, for sponsoring today's video. What's up, guys? It's your buddy Tyler coming at you with a brand new video here on My Retro Life. And back in the day, my dad was the biggest Sega fan you could ever find over the age of 30 years old. I mean, my dad just loved everything that Sega stood for. Sega! Everything about Sega felt more and more like a mature gaming console aimed at people his age, for adults. When it came to Sega, my dad wanted it all. He was crazy about the company. In fact, he actually sat us down on our living room couch and we did a promo tape for my cousins that basically was a love letter to Sega.
Hey, all you out there in New York, we're ready here with Genesis Power.
If Dad could have been Sega's official spokesperson, he would have jumped at the opportunity. And then when the Sega CD came out, that was a game changer. Suddenly, Dad's beloved Sega Genesis became a multimedia device. He loved geeking out over the Sega CD and its specs, the CD quality audio that was coming out of our Genesis.
Mistakes happen, guys. The important thing is we're all on the same team.
The Sega CD was such an amazing leap forward, and Sega, when the Sega CD came out, Dad became a lifer.
Pitfall CD.
But that good faith could only last so long, because there was a time when Sega did my dad wrong. In the winter of 1994, Sega released the 32X add-on to the Sega Genesis. This was a second add-on for the Sega Genesis after the Sega CD. And at that point, we kind of became a little weary as to what Sega was doing. Like, what was their game plan? We had heard in the video game magazines about the Sega Saturn, the successor to the Sega Genesis. But then all of a sudden we started hearing about this 32X console or add-on. It would essentially evolve your Sega Genesis or upgrade your Genesis into a 32-bit console. I mean, it was right there in the name, 32X. And so I can't say we weren't excited. I mean, we were very excited. You know, up until this point, Sega had never done anything to warrant us not having faith in the brand, us not believing that Sega would deliver in spades, because we love the company. We were riding on a Sega high in 1994.
December 24th, 1979.
By Christmas of that year, November to be exact, Sega decided they were going to drop their 32X add-on. I was going through some of the old home movie footage that I have in the clips, and I happened to see something lurking in the background, in the shadows of this clip from December of 1994. What do you see there? That's the Sega 32X on our home entertainment console. And look, there's the box too. You can kind of make out the original box. So this shows me that we had just recently gotten it. So we got it at launch. What I do remember about getting the 32X, what sticks out the most, is how angry the 32X made Dad. We would have definitely picked up the Sega 32X at Electronics Boutique in the West Oaks Mall. Around this time, that was like our exclusive store. We were buying so many Sega games and just games in general. From this store, we bought one game. I remember this. At first, it was just one game that we bought with the console, and that was Star Wars Arcade. Out of the 3 games that were released on the Sega 32X at launch, Star Wars Arcade was the one to own.
Everything's so much cooler on 32X. It's like art, man.
The 32X sound and graphics are jamming.
I remember Star Wars Arcade was the first one we bought. It was a bit of a chore hooking up the 32X, and I remember my dad trying to hook this thing up, and I remember watching him just looking at the instructions, figuring out how to put on the metal plate that goes onto the bottom that helps secure the 32X better on your Sega Genesis. We had a Model 1, and I just remember him having a little bit of a hard time figuring out how that all worked. And then there was a third AC adapter unit that also had to be attached to your 32X. So the Sega Genesis, when you hook this thing up, had 3 different AC power units powering this monstrosity, this Frankenstein monster that was being created in our living room. It seemed as though Dad had finally figured it out and gotten the whole thing working and hooked up. But when we first turned on our Sega Genesis with the 32X attached to it, we were met with the most garbled and lowest quality audio that we'd ever heard on our Sega Genesis unit, especially after getting the Sega CD. The way the Star Wars theme music comes on just right at you, in your face, with horrible sound quality, it made my dad think that the unit was defective. He thought we had a defective unit because the audio was so bad on that game. I remember him turning off the unit, turning it back on, and looking back at me and saying, "What's going on here? What is this? This sounds horrible." The audio quality of this characters, like General Akbar when he says to you, "Destroy enemy fighters," was so garbled.
Wipe out enemy fighters.
I think what was going on was my dad was thinking that because the Sega CD was also attached to our unit, that of course we're still going to get CD quality music, or at least good quality sound. It was such a shocker to Dad because this was supposed to be 32-bit next-gen technology, and for it to sound worse than most Sega Genesis games was a complete slap in the face. Like, as a consumer, Dad had just plunked down like $150, however much it cost when it launched. And this was not what he was expecting. To him, it was like, well, this unit must be defective. Sega would never let something of this quality reach the store shelves. He had amazing faith in the Sega brand. And so we actually packed up the unit and brought it back to Electronics Boutique and returned it. We got another 32X unit and we brought it home after returning it. I can remember the car ride home, Dad just going on and on about how it's got to be the unit. It's got to be. There's no way that this unit is just a bad console. This is 32-bit technology. This is next gen. There's no way the console is just bad, right? Well, when we got home and hooked up this new unit that we had just exchanged the old one for, Dad was met with the same exact result. Horrible sounding audio coming out of this Star Wars game. And I can just remember my dad being baffled, being bewildered that it wasn't the unit. It was actually the 32X. The 32X sound quality was just that bad. Dad was not happy. I just remember Dad shaking his head in disbelief. He couldn't believe that it wasn't a defective unit, it was just the console was bad. Sega had duped him into buying this new add-on console, and it was not meeting his expectations. And so he wanted them to know it. He wanted them to know his displeasure. And I remember him picking up the phone that day and actually saying to me, I'm going to call Sega. I'm going to call them. I'm going to let them know. I am a loyal customer. I have been for years. I buy all their products. I've spent so much money on this company. And this is what they give us on day one with the game that's supposed to be the killer app. He called up Sega of America, and I remember him talking to this customer sales representative, and just really, the New Yorker really came out too, because Dad was originally from New York, and he was letting them know, how could you guys release this? This is crazy. This is crazy. I thought my unit was defective. Is there something else that I'm missing? I remember him talking to the rep on the phone saying, is there anything I'm doing that's wrong? Because this sounds terrible. This sounds awful. And the guy on the other end of the phone was just saying, no, sir, I believe you have it all hooked up correctly. It's fine. It's okay. That was not good enough for Dad. No, he couldn't believe it. He's like, you mean to tell me that this unit is fine? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the game. The game is sounding that bad. The 32X sounds that awful. Yep, that's what it was. And so after this heated discussion on the phone and Dad feeling like an angry consumer, he hung up the phone and we had to kind of just take it for what it was. It took a little bit of time for Dad to warm up to the Sega 32X. Once we got games like Virtual Racing Deluxe, which looked amazing on the 32X, it really was far superior than the Genesis version of the game. And once we started getting like these incredible arcade ports of classic Sega arcade games like Space Harrier and Afterburner, we really started warming up to the 32X. It became a unit that we really looked forward to new releases. In fact, I remember us always talking about, okay, I wonder when Outrun's going to come out, and man, if the 32X can do arcade conversions this well, like what kind of incredible arcade games are we going to get on the unit? And unfortunately, those never really came. The 32X didn't last very long. It was discontinued by the end of 1995, truly was a failure. And not just a failure in the eyes of critics, but especially in the eyes of consumers. And Dad actually did eventually come around to Star Wars Arcade. Once he got over the bad audio, he actually really enjoyed the game. I do feel like the 32X is one of the main reasons why consumers lost faith in the brand. My dad was such a Sega fan, and for him to react the way he did to the Sega 32X launch and the console itself, I mean, the average consumer must have really hated it and been so displeased with what Sega had put out. And I think, honestly, guys, that is the moment right there. The 32X is like the moment where everything started going wrong for Sega.
Welcome to the next level.
Well, that's about it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. I want to know, were you a 32X owner back in the day? Did you happen to get the console at launch? And if so, how did it make you feel at launch? Did you end up returning the unit thinking it was defective like my dad? I wonder how many people actually did that. Let me know in the comments below if you're one of those people. I definitely want to hear the story. And if this is your first time to the channel, please do consider subscribing. I love talking about my game crazy family and all the amazing adventures we had with video games, even some of the misadventures we had with video games, so many of which were caught on tape by my dad. All right, guys, that's it. I'm Tyler. I'll catch you next time.